Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. I work with a company that times races, running, cycling, triathlon, you name it. The owner is a guy named John, who runs Race Timing Co. At a recent race, some of our equipment was stolen. It's expensive and very specialized gear. Maybe 200 people in the US use this system. The stolen components cost about $4,000 in total. About a month later, John saw the stolen equipment pop up on eBay. He reached out to the seller via eBay and asked for his stolen equipment to be returned. The seller was a jerk, as you might expect from someone selling stolen goods. Seller: there's no way you know it's your equipment. The thing is, photo number 3 showed one of the boxes with a printed label on it. Race Timing CO. John owner. John's phone number. It literally had his name on it. John escalated to eBay to at least prevent his stolen equipment from being sold. eBay totally dropped the ball. They bought the seller's story that he had bought it at a mail auction for lost mail, which made no sense since the seller's info was in the same town where the equipment was stolen. The seller also tried to claim that John had no way of proving it was his stolen equipment, except, it had his name and phone number on it. eBay ruled against John, saying he had no evidence the seller hadn't bought it at a mail auction. So John hatched a plan. He did what any rational person would do. He purchased his own stolen equipment back, using an employee's name, and asked that it be shipped through the United States Postal Service. He mentioned he was right next to a post office. When the equipment was marked shipped, it ended up arriving at his coworker's house in another state for good measure. And that's when John called the Postal Inspection Service. He had the seller's full name, address, and proof that he knew it was stolen. He had police reports, pictures of his name on the equipment, matching serial numbers, and transcripts of him informing the seller that it was stolen. USPS inspectors knocked on the guy's door 2 days later and reportedly found numerous stolen items. He was charged with almost a dozen federal felonies, including felony theft, trafficking stolen goods across state lines, and lying to federal agents. And to top it off, John filed a stolen goods complaint with eBay since he now had tons of proof that he had been sold stolen goods. So he got his money back, minus shipping. A month later, I was at the office when John called me in. John: hey, I wanted to update you on that situation with the stolen equipment. Me: oh, what happened? John: well, after the postal inspectors got involved, they found a bunch of stolen items at the guy's place. He's facing multiple federal charges now. Me: wow, that's intense. Did you get all our equipment back? John: yeah, I did. And the best part, I filed a complaint with eBay and got my money back, so we didn't lose a cent except for shipping costs. Me: that's incredible. I can't believe how well that turned out. John: yeah, it's satisfying to see justice served, and it's a reminder that you shouldn't mess with someone who's determined to get their stuff back. Later that week, the story of John's plan and its outcome spread around the office. Everyone was talking about it, amazed at how he managed to outsmart the thief and get our equipment back. Coworker 1: did you hear about John's stolen equipment situation? Coworker 2: yeah, he's like a real-life detective or something. Coworker 3: it's just so satisfying to know the thief got what he deserved. John's actions not only saved the company thousands of dollars, but also served as a lesson to all of us. It showed that with determination and the right approach, you can stand up against injustice and come out on top. And in the end, it brought a sense of closure and satisfaction that justice had been served. So I was laid off. No big deal, right? It happens. But in this instance, it's a little different. I was working at a tech startup and was one of the early employees. I was one of the key people to develop their technology, which significantly helped enable them to raise tens of millions of dollars. I was told early on that they would basically take care of me as the company grew. Well, for a time at least, the company grew leaps and bounds. Again, much in part to the excellent tech I helped to develop. Yet the company had little concern for little ol' me, Meanwhile, they brought on a bevy of new managers and high-level people, and yet my career was basically stagnant while I was there. But then things started to slow down due to economic conditions. There had been a couple of layoffs, and I figured it was probably time to leave the sinking ship. So I lined up a new position at another company. I then went into my manager and told him that it seemed like more layoffs were imminent, and that I had secured a job offer at another company. I asked him if it would be a good idea if I should take it, and he said that he would let me know. A couple of days later, after he had discussed things with the CEO, they said I was okay and not to take the other position. I turned down the other position because I had invested so much of myself into this company, even having sold my house and moved hundreds of miles to work at this company, and I still had a lot of stock options that I was hoping would be worth something someday. Literally a couple of weeks later, guess what? Yep, they laid me off. Now that another position was no longer available, and because this was at the height of the recession, I was out of work for 4 months until I found another position. I could have even lost my house during this time, and I had to sell some cool stuff to keep paying the bills. The new position I finally found was much further from home and was a financial hardship. I would have been better off if they had just been honest with me and told me to take the offer I had in hand previously. But honesty wasn't ever their policy. Anyhow, before I was involuntarily separated from the company, I was working with a Fortune 500 company that was trying to partner with us on some technology. After leaving, I got wind that they were going to invest $15 million to the company. That bothered me for several reasons, mostly because most of us were pretty sure that the crooked CEO was pilfering the company for personal gain. I'm thinking that this guy shouldn't be rewarded for his atrocious management of the company, and honestly, I didn't think that it would be a wise investment for this large company. I contacted my inside guy at the Fortune 500 and told him some of my concerns about the stewardship of the money at the startup, and that it wasn't really a wise investment. This company was looking for a distribution deal for our technology, so I told them the best use of their money would be to make a deal to exchange a large blanket purchase order for stock. This way, the startup company would still get a big chunk of investment money coming in, but they would have to perform for it. It's the difference between giving a kid an allowance for no reason at all, or giving a kid an allowance based on if they did their chores or not. I didn't necessarily want the investors to walk away from a partnership, because I had many friends still at the company and didn't want to see them out in the cold. So my thought was that this type of a deal would keep the company afloat while minimizing the potential for pilfering and better protecting the investment. All in all, if structured right, it could be a win-win, and make it much more difficult for the crooked CEO and his cronies to loot the company. I additionally told them that I wouldn't recommend investing a penny unless they got a seat on the board of directors. That way, they would have first-hand knowledge of some of the shenanigans going on behind the scenes with their money. That was about it. Now they were armed with some additional information and tactics to perhaps better protect their investment, as well as help ensure that if they did invest, everything would be above board. Sometime later, I heard that the CEO pulled the entire company into the conference room and chewed them a new one. He was furious, because the investor had somewhat done what I had suggested. They had dropped their investment from $15 million to $5 million, and had come up with some sort of blanket order or something along those lines. I'm not quite sure, but in essence it meant a $10 million loss in the mind of the CEO. He's a bit of a fat slob, so it's quite unfortunate that he didn't just have a heart attack right then and there. No surprise, in the process, the investor was denied the board seat, and one can only guess why, dirty secrets and all. In fact, one of the board members that the CEO did bring on board had already done time for defrauding his clients. A marriage made in heaven, I guess. So, not necessarily meant as revenge, but sweet nonetheless, the company basically lost $10 million because of what they did to me. They were all but expecting this money. Had they not laid me off, I probably wouldn't have even thought about putting the investor's interests above that of the corrupt company. In the end, surprising to no one, the investor eventually got majorly screwed by the unscrupulous startup company anyways. The two companies had some disagreements about their distribution agreement, and the investor ended up having to pay a major settlement to the startup company after a contentious mediation. But never fear, don't screw with a Fortune 500. As the startup company was starting to gasp its last breath, they were working on a promising deal with another company they had identified as a major potential customer, one that would put them back on the track to financial success and further line the CEO's dirty pockets. Well, the Fortune 500 company got wind of the deal, bought the other company, and then shut down the deal. That's ninja-level revenge. So in the end, 2 nuclear revenges for the price of 1. I couldn't have been happier to hear about the karmic justice once again hitting the company. Now the company is all but dead. All physical assets went to auction. The CEO is milking the last few dollars out of the account. But because our SEC Securities Exchange Commission is all but worthless, he'll start another venture and the cycle will repeat itself. The sad thing is that the CEO, in my humble opinion, makes Elizabeth Holmes, the CEO of Theranos, look like Mother Teresa. I pray that one day they do a Netflix docuseries exposing all that went on at this mess of a company. I can guarantee you it will be quite a hit. I have a 10-year-old son. He is a semi-ambulant wheelchair user. He has a medical condition that makes walking difficult, and the older he gets, the more difficult it is. He can walk short distances, 10 to 12 steps, but then it starts to get painful, so he uses a scootboard, think square skateboard with caster wheels on each corner, to get around the house, and a wheelchair when out of the house. He does need his chair, even though he can stand and walk, and he is very independent. Nothing is holding him back. He is also very social. He loves talking to his specialists and knows all the nurses by name and their pet names. He is also well known in our local area. The employees in the shops all know him. He talks to everyone. Before I start this story, I should add that his wheelchair is not a standard hospital gray wheelchair. It is electric blue, has Pokemon wheel covers, and his rain guards armrests have stickers of animals on them. The armrests flip up so he has access to the wheels, and they look like wings behind his chair. It is very much modified and personalized. It isn't a gray, stock standard chair. Today, we had our monthly pediatrician appointment. We have been seeing the same pediatrician since birth, so he is like a family friend now. A few days ago, luckily at night, during a storm, a tree branch fell onto the building, took out some windows, and caused some water damage. So they have been doing some repair work. This meant that his pediatrician's normal office was unusable, and they had converted another space to use. But this meant going up 5 steps. Our pediatrician is a late 30s, early 40s, chilled-out surfer dude with long hair. He came out to the waiting room and told my son about the room change, and that he had to tackle some stairs today, or he could have a piggyback ride. Of course, my son chose the piggyback with a giggle. After checking with me that it was okay, he scooped him up and off they went. So I parked his wheelchair out of the way against a wall in the waiting room and followed them in. After his appointment, my son was piggybacked out to the waiting room, and our pediatrician popped him on a chair and left to speak with the receptionist. I looked around, and his wheelchair was gone. I walked around the corner of the waiting room, and there was a child about 8 years old wheeling himself around in it. I know wheelchairs are a fascination to kids, and I really didn't mind that he was having a wheel around in it. I find it helps with education and acceptance of kids with disabilities, and how much harder life is sometimes, even if wheelchairs are fun. I walked over to him and asked him if he had fun wheeling himself around. Child: Yes, it was fun. Me: I'm glad you enjoyed it, but I need the wheelchair back now so I can take my son home. He jumped straight out of the chair, smiled at me, and I said thanks and wheeled it toward my son. All was good until the screech happened. Karen: What are you doing? That is my son's wheelchair. He was riding in that. Me: Actually, it is my son's. She cut me off. Karen: No, it isn't. My son saw it first. At this point, my son stood up and walked the few steps toward me. He was getting concerned. Me. This doesn't belong to the practice. I purchased it for my son. It is his. Karen. No, you didn't. He doesn't even need a wheelchair. He can walk. She turned the wheelchair toward her, but I held onto the handles firmly. I told my son to go and sit back down, as I saw this wasn't going to be a quick fix for him to keep standing. Me. Please stop yelling at me. This is my son's wheelchair. I have hundreds of photos of him in it on my phone. See? I opened the Photos app on my phone and showed her photos of him in the chair and with the flywheel attached. Karen. That is a different chair. This doesn't have that thing on the front of it. She pulled the chair toward her. Me. That thing is his bicycle hand crank attachment that allows him to go fast on the bike track like the other kids. It attaches here using these attachments. I pointed to the attachments. If you look at the chair in this picture, it has the Pokemon wheel covers just like this one. See? This is his chair. I pulled the chair back toward me. Karen. No, it isn't. Why can't you wait your turn? Give it back. At this point, the pediatrician came back from speaking with the receptionist, and the Karen tried to involve him in the discussion. He ignored her, silently took the wheelchair from me, walked it around the Karen, scooped up my son and settled him in his chair. He turned to the Karen and said, "Pediatrician, that is my son's name, chair. It belongs to him, not to the practice. You can't have it. We don't accept stealing, and the welfare of our existing patients is our focus. Your actions today are contrary to acceptable behavior in this practice. We have decided to not accept your family into the practice. Please leave." The Karen screamed and shouted at me about how I had cost her an appointment with my lies and how it wasn't fair. Our pediatrician just put both arms out to his sides, think big stretching arms forming a T shape with his body, and stood between her and us, repeating for her to leave. There would be no further discussion, and she wouldn't be seen today or any other day. She huffed, grabbed her very embarrassed-looking child's hand, and left. Our pediatrician was very apologetic, but honestly he couldn't have done a better job in dealing with the Karen. He reached over the counter, grabbed a lollipop, and gave it to my son, telling me there would be no out-of-pocket payment for us today, and to just make an appointment for next month. He is an awesome pediatrician and a human being. We drove the hour and a bit home to our smallish town and stopped at the supermarket to grab some groceries. My son likes to zoom around the supermarket, getting items and bringing them back to me, before zooming off again for the next thing on the list. He knows all the staff, and they all talk to him, direct him to where he needs to find his item, and talk about their pets with him because he is a huge animal lover. It is a social outing for him, so I usually start at the front of the store and make my way through the aisles while my zoomer goes and gets random stuff. We were doing our usual thing, and he didn't come back. I didn't think much of it because the staff will often steal him away to the bakery for broken biscuits or an extra donut they can't fit into a package. As I rounded the corner of the next aisle, I saw my son at the other end of the aisle, standing while holding onto a shelf, and another child sitting in his wheelchair. From the way he was standing, I could tell my son was in pain, and he was talking to the child while Karen was talking to my son as well. I could see she was getting animated, but from the other end of the aisle, I couldn't hear what they were saying. I hurried up the aisle and took hold of my son from the shelf. He was crying, and he told me that the kid wouldn't get out of his chair, and Karen wouldn't make him move. Me to the child. "Honey, can you hop out of my son's chair? He is in a lot of pain and needs to get back into it." My son had started to shake, and I knew he was in quite a bit of pain, and his legs would soon just give out from under him, so I lowered him to the floor. Karen. "No, he won't. He is having a turn. Your bratty kid wouldn't even let him go up and down the aisle more than once before asking for it back. My son has a sore ankle, and I am going to tell the manager we need it more than you." Me. "What? This isn't a hire chair, it is my son's chair." Karen. "Don't be ridiculous. I see that chair all the time being used by kids." Me. "You may see the chair in here a lot because my son and I come here a lot for our groceries, but it is his chair." Karen. "No, it isn't. It is in the store every time I come in, and different kids are using it." Me. "You are mistaken. It is my son's chair. I have photos of him in it. He needs it back." I opened my phone and tried to find a picture of my son, without the flywheel attachment, to avoid the same discussion as the morning. Karen: "Nope, we are taking it," and off she went, wheeling her son away. My son let out a full-on wail that was a combination of pain and distress that his wheels were leaving. I ran the few steps after her and grabbed at the chair, firmly saying, "No, you aren't taking my son's chair." The wail and my shouting had employees popping out from aisles, and the manager came quickly from the service desk area. Karen tried to preempt the discussion and yelled at the manager that my son had had the chair long enough. Her son had a sore ankle, so he needed it more, and they should buy more higher chairs so that there are more available to shoppers. I was standing back a little from them because once the manager arrived, I knew he would deal with it, and I needed to check on my son down the aisle on the floor, crying. I was trying to calm him from a distance by letting him know I wasn't far away, while not letting a $4,500 wheelchair out of my sight. The manager looked at me, looked at her, looked back at me with this look of "what the hell" on his face, and asked where my son was. I pointed and told him down the aisle on the floor. With a look of horror, he asked if they had tipped him out of his chair. I said I didn't know what exactly happened. He was standing holding a shelf when I found him. He turned around and almost roared at this woman to get her son out of a disabled person's wheelchair so we could get him off the floor. It doesn't belong to the store. They don't hire wheelchairs here. The poor child was trying to get out of the chair, and Karen kept pushing him back down into the chair, telling him that he needed it. The child was nearly in tears and getting very upset. Meanwhile, 2 staff members had found my son and were now sitting on the floor with him, holding his hand and drying his tears. The manager was losing his mind while trying to be professional, but I could see he was in disbelief at this woman's behavior. Then the troops arrived. In the background, I saw an employee with 2 police officers in tow. It looked like they were on a break and were grabbing things to eat. The Karen turned, and was all relieved that the police were there to sort out this manager, and started on with her wailing story. The policewoman shushed the Karen, and spoke with the manager, who explained that my son and I were regular customers. He knew us, and this was my son's wheelchair. But Karen insisted it was a higher chair. My son was currently sitting on the floor in the next aisle, and Karen wouldn't let her son get out of his chair and insisted he used it. The male officer walked forward and looked down the aisle at my son and nodded at his partner. The female officer very firmly told the Karen to get her child out of my son's chair immediately, or she would arrest her for theft. Her child tried again to get out of the chair, and she pushed him back in again. The officer pulled the wheelchair back and asked the child to hop out, and he immediately did. The Karen wailed. The officer then turned the wheelchair around to the male officer, who walked down the aisle with it. I don't know exactly what happened next, as I was getting my son back into his chair and calming him down. The assistant manager took us back to the manager's office, so we had a quiet space. She got my son some water so he could have pain medication, and in about 20 minutes he was fine. He told us that he had stood up and walked 2 steps forward to get something off a higher shelf, and the other child had jumped into his wheelchair and asked if he could ride it up the aisle and back. My son said sure, thinking that this kid would just go up and back and he could get back in. But Karen wouldn't let that happen. He started to cry again, and I told him he was very kind to the little boy, and to not let Karen ruin his day. After a while, the manager came into the office and said that the woman had been arrested since she made a scene and was trying to slap the officers, and she was also banned from the store. He said she had been causing trouble in the store for a while with her careness, and they were glad to see the back of her. He apologized profusely for what had happened. When we left his office, we found that our shopping was all bagged up and ready for us to go. They had taken my shopping list from the trolley, finished my shopping, checked it out at no charge, and bagged it all up, ready for us. When we got home, there were a few extra treats in the bags for my son. I live in an older apartment complex but don't mind because it has security and nice amenities. Most folks own their units, but some rent them out, and I got a great deal for renting during the pandemic. Even though it is older, the average unit sells for over $1 million due to the current housing market. So it's a lot of older folks who bought when it's cheap, new money, and middle-class renters. It can be a hassle getting up to my apartment from the street since it's 2 elevator rides. Street to security and security to apartment when it's super busy though. Right now only one household at a time can be in the elevators since they aren't big enough for social distancing, which can take even more time. Management also modified the elevators so that they don't stop if someone is already in them, to avoid people trying to hop in while you are going to your floor. So now it doesn't really matter if you press the up or the down button. All it does is call an elevator and you can go wherever. This was sent in an email to everyone in the complex. I'm heading back to my place after walking my dog with my headphones on. A purchase I saved up a long time for and use daily, including for work. We get to the first set of elevators, and there is an older couple and a middle-aged lady waiting. She's a typical WASP for the building. Pearls, diamond earrings, big wedding ring, fancy clothes. Probably has a husband that's a senior design engineer or something while she is a marketing manager. I see that only the up button is pressed, so I push the down button to call another elevator and return to my spot in line. I know that once their elevator leaves, I can press the up button again and save everyone some time, as now 2 more post-dog walk folks are behind me. The older couple leave in their elevator, and then the second one comes. My glasses are quite foggy at this point, but I see this lady waving for me to take it, so I pull off my headphones. I tell her, "You were here first, no worries, I'll catch the next one. It's going down, it's for you." "Oh, I was just calling another elef. Don't you see the line? Get in the elevator." She's being rude. She doesn't know how the elevators work now, even though it's been a year. I decide it's not my problem to explain why she is wrong, put on my headphones and get in, then punch floor 1 to get to the security desk. While the doors are closing, she must have then pressed the up button as they open back up. I press the door close button and hear a loud "what?" over my music. She then sprints into the elevator and sees that I am going up. "Oh, so that's it. You couldn't wait, so you lied. You skipped me. This is my elevator, get out," while holding her hand over the door sensor so they don't close. I pause the music on my headphones and say, "I said I would catch the next one, but you insisted." She must have thought I was turning my music up and taking a stance on this elevator miscommunication, because she then starts grabbing my headphone and smacking me right across the face. "Take those off. This is my elevator, you liar. Screw you, get out of my elevator." My 40-pound cattle dog is deaf, but he isn't stupid. He started barking and growling in full force, causing the lady to jump back with my headphones in her hands. I'm dragging him out of the elevator when she then runs forward and kicks him square in the stomach. She throws my headphones to the ground, stomps on them, and kicks them out of the elevator and takes her ride up. I'm freaking out. The other people who were waiting in line are freaking out. All for an elevator. Thankfully, after about 20 minutes, my dog gets up and is fine but skittish. One of the folks in line must have told security what happened because one of the guards came down to talk to me. Police have been called. All the security cams are being pulled, and the lady has been identified, and I was asked to wait upstairs. I give my statements, and we ride up together to security. She is there, along with her husband and the 2 folks who were behind me. Yep, he's definitely some sort of upper management techie with his button-up tucked into his dark blue jeans. I ask if I can put my dog in my apartment. I do so, then return. The husband asks me how much the headphones were. I say $400. I used a coupon code, and he hands me the money from his wallet. I quickly take it and put it in my pocket. The lady is looking smug. I guess this isn't the first time money has solved a situation she got in. But did she forget she didn't just break my headphones? The police ask if I want to press charges. I say yes, and she starts yelling at me. Her husband is holding her and trying to drag her away from the police and me, while she throws insults and swear words one after another, when she starts yelling that she hopes she hurts my dog and how she is going to kill him. The police use their taser and take her down to the patrol with her husband following behind. From what I understand, she is being charged with assault, animal cruelty, assault on a police officer resisting arrest, and lastly public intoxication. All this for a miscommunication and saving 3 minutes waiting for an elevator. I was talking to my friend about this because he has a nuclear story, and I wanted to share it, and I was asking about details. He shot me down, but he also reminded me of Dax. And basically that whole job had a bunch of great stories. I was a second-year apprentice carpenter in 2012, and I got a job working up north in the oil and gas. We were on shift for 12 hours a day, but they basically only gave us work for 4 hours. Our real job was not to become a statistic. I'm not saying I'm smart in the general scheme of things, but in the trades, you don't have a lot of sharp knives. I always liked math and I was good at it. On this job I was a low man on the totem pole, and I did get bullied a bit. I'm not a big guy in height or width, but I've got a sharp tongue and a quick wit, thick skin too. There was a fourth-year guy named Dax, who was on my 5-man team. I forgot what we were doing, but he made a wrong calculation, and I corrected him. Not to be a jerk, but because I didn't want our crew to get in trouble. That's why I became his target. He was about the same height as me, but roid wide, and the anger that comes with it. So towards the end of our shift, a couple of turnarounds later, I came into the saw shack, which is basically our workshop, to hide until the end of the shift. I come in and it's him, 2 newfies and 2 other guys working. So to those that don't know, newfies are the Irish of Canada. They're so funny, and all the ones that I know don't have a mean bone in their body. Their humor is observational with that crazy accent, and all their colloquialisms. So these guys were actually in the saw shop working, and Dax asked me to take the output of the table saw, which is fine. I look and there's some writing on the output side of the table saw. In big black Sharpie was written, "Alex doesn't even know the difference between 20 millimeters and 200 millimeters. You're an idiot." Something like that. I am Alex, and I don't know the metric. Residential construction uses imperial and commercial uses metric. I have no reference for metric measure because I was mostly residential until this job. It was true. So the room is quiet. I feel 5 pairs of eyes looking at me, wondering what I'm going to do, and all I can say is wow, as the hamster in my brain is on his treadmill a mile a minute thinking, it's near the end of shift, and this is our hiding spot, so some more people are shuffling in, and I can feel people looking over my shoulder reading. My dad, bless his soul, was a smart guy, and one thing he said was, if someone is bullying, you stand up to them. You will probably get kicked, but a bully only looks for easy targets, and if someone fights back, there will always be another victim that doesn't. They will move on. He was more pragmatic than anything. So I asked the room if anyone had a red Sharpie. One was produced, and I began to make grammatical, punctuation, and spelling corrections on Dax's manifesto. So one of the newfies, and all of his accent and colloquialisms, said to the room something like, "He's correcting the spelling." The room absolutely erupted in laughter, with the exception of one person, Dax. He was so livid. Most people were laughing at the newfie humor, but that's not how Dax saw it. In front of everyone, he told me I was going to die for this. So we had to go into our lunchroom for the shift debrief, and Dax was noticeably absent. Apparently he grabbed a belt sander and sanded off the message before the next shift could see it. But that's not the end. We were flying in and flying out, and Dax lived about 3 hours away from me, but we shared the same major airport. So I went to my foreman, who was also a newfie, and gave him a heads up. He was a stone's throw away from retirement, and he did not like waves. Dax was a tidal wave of trouble. So we were in a quasi-union. I don't actually know what they did, but I do know one thing. They didn't like to do anything except to collect dues. So my foreman calls our steward, who is the absolutely laziest guy I've ever seen. He had the world's greatest job security, and he had a hammer that never got touched. Like you could take it back to the store he got it from, as if he bought it yesterday. Like he polished it. This guy didn't like doing anything, but he especially didn't like filling out forms or defending people that are bad news. So what did he do? He called the threat against me an incident, An incident isn't specifically an accident, it can be anything. And up north there were lots of drugs, and a condition of employment is no drugs. So the steward got Dax pissed, as in he had to do a piss test. I think the threat he made against me in itself was enough to get him fired, but the piss test was ironclad physical evidence, and Dax didn't pass. Once the paperwork was done, they went to Dax's room, made him pack up, and took him to the aerodrome for the next flight out. Moral of the story: don't screw with the grammar police. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences and opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.